Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining Drilling Deeper, a Pit and Quarry podcast. I'm Kevin Yannick, editor-in-chief. We've got episode 6 on tap for you. I'd like to start with our episode sponsor and give them a thank you and a shout out. That would be Geologic. Geologic uses scientific investigation and engineering design to provide innovative solutions to the most challenging mining, construction, and development issues in a safe, effective, and cost-efficient manner. When it needs to be done right the first time, call Geologic at 770-824-4212. Again, that's Geologic, our episode sponsor. Thanks, Geologic, and thanks and welcome back to Jack Kapansky, our fearless managing editor on Pit and Quarry. He's healthy, it looks like.
Yeah, much better off than I was last time. You had to go it solo. Sorry to leave you on an island there, but you did a great job. Feeling better. This winter's just been a brutal one as far as getting sick. It seems like everyone's getting something, and I unfortunately fell victim to that as well. But glad to be back and healthy and ready to talk some rock.
We'll get into rock for a minute, but I want to extend the banter by just a moment because maybe a few folks out there listening know that I'm a Michigan Wolverines fan, and unfortunately, I think the only one at Pit and Quarry, just about the only one, minus one of our designers on Pit and Quarry, Courtney Townsend, who likes the Wolverines, or that team up north, as we would say in Ohio here. Ohio born and bred. Don't like Ohio State. Actually, I think I would call it a hatred. But they got it done. First time since '97, and just had to get that out there. Anybody listening from Michigan or of the Wolverines fandom, we got it done.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, first off, congratulations. Obviously very exciting. Like you said, first time since '97. I have a couple of buddies that are Wolverines fans as well. They were super excited. Shout out Ryan Landolf and Dylan Bowers. Obviously a big thing. You and I were talking ahead of the game. It just felt like they were the better team. They were going to get it done. I think I felt a little more optimistically than you did. I was sort of anticipating it to be the wider margin affair that it actually was. But they had an incredible season. They got it done. Shout out to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Let's see where he ends up after this year. And can't necessarily say I blame you for the Ohio State hatred. As a Ohio native who was kind of born into Ohio State fandom, but as a Notre Dame fan by choice, I was at Notre Dame, Ohio State earlier this year in South Bend, and yeah, the Ohio State fans that were there left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. So I can't say I blame you for the Ohio State hatred. Don't necessarily love the Wolverine fandom, but nonetheless, congrats on the ship. Very exciting for you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jack. Not sure our colleagues on Pit and Quarry, Rob, Dino, Tim, they're going to love the Michigan banter here, but it is what it is, guys. But for the purposes of our readership or our listenership, if that's a word I can put out there, as we were planning episode 6 here, which is slated to drop on January 16th, we were thinking about some of the presentations that the magazine did in tandem with other organizations. The last podcast episode, that would have been episode 5, it was kind of a microcosm of a state of the industry report that I delivered to an industry dealer toward the year end 2023, and also in December I had the opportunity to go down to Columbia, South Carolina, for the South Carolina Aggregates Association's management workshop and exhibition rather. It's the third year they've had that, and they asked me to talk about innovations in quarry and plant technology. So I gave a presentation down there. Jack, you had a chance to be in South Carolina for the 2022 rendition of that show, and being down in Columbia this time around for year 3 in December of 23. Yeah, it seemed like it was a really great platform for our industry. It's a growing market. Got a lot of support there for the association, and it was a great opportunity for me to visit with the good producers down in South Carolina.
Yeah, no, I'll like you mentioned, being down there in 2022 was definitely a very fun experience. Only the second year that the association had existed, and the second year that they had put on the show this last year, 2023, obviously being the third year of all that. And yeah, being down there was super fun. Got to moderate a panel down there. Like you mentioned last year, you were able to give a presentation. So a good working relationship, obviously, but also just, objectively that, for a state association that's so young, got to give credit to Jessica Palmer for doing what she's been doing there as executive director. That association has just seemingly grown year after year. I mean, I know it seems like they've doubled and then doubled again their attendance at their workshop and expo. So I was glad you got to go this year to kind of experience that. And yeah, they're doing a great job down there, and definitely something to check out if you're down in the South Carolina area and not already a part of it.
Yeah. So really, as I prepared my presentation for them, I think I even mentioned to Jessica Palmer, I'm like, you know what? This presentation, I'd love to podcast it up, bring Jack in, get some commentary on it. And so that's what we're going to do here today. Again, talking about innovations in quarry and plant technologies. Um, Maybe just to kind of frame this a little bit, I was thinking about the history of our industry in terms of our adoption of technology. And again, I haven't been around, just like you haven't been around for the entire 100+ year history of quarries and aggregates, Jack. But just the things we know, the history that we are aware of, as the editors of the magazine, it's an industry that long relied on manpower. When you think about the operations of the early 20th century or even the mid 20th century, it took a lot of people, a lot of labor to make those operations go. And today we're in an era where you can get away with just having single digits, 7 or 8 people even in an operation, and a lot of that is a kind of a byproduct of the technology and automation that we've seen. But we've seen more technology, I'd say, come in, or more willingness or readiness per se to take on technology. Although, as I think about our industry historically too, I know over the years I've come across studies from third-party research entities that were looking at various industries and kind of analyzing their willingness or unwillingness to adopt technology. And in mining, I would say, with aggregates as part of mining, mining is always the laggard, it seems like, in terms of industries that are on the cutting edge, and that's long been the case. But of late, I think that maybe we're going to get out of the basement in terms of technology adoption. We're coming into the 21st century, and it's kind of an exciting time. And we'll talk about some of the specifics as to why it's exciting, but it's an exciting time, I'd say, for our industry in terms of change.
I guess you could put it in the way that the industry has kind of been set in stone, if you will, pun intended.
You didn't write that one down, huh?
No, that was straight off the dome. That's all this beautiful mind at work. Yeah, I think that was one of the things, as I've gotten to know the industry a little bit more, that is on one hand surprising, but on the other hand isn't, because you do have these long-standing companies that are generation after generation after generation, and people stay in these jobs and these careers and with these companies for so long that you get used to a certain type of way of operating, and change isn't obviously always the easiest thing. There's a lot of fear, costs, uncertainty that goes into changing this kind of stuff. So on the one hand, it kind of makes sense, but on the other hand, learning what I have about the industry, they do seem to be on the forefront of so much other stuff that it kind of surprised me when I realized that there was as much hesitancy as there was perhaps to adopt. And yeah, definitely, I think in this last year, at least speaking for myself, from what I've seen and heard, it does seem like that trend may be starting to shift, where there's more willingness and more ability to kind of try new things, do trial and error. And I think people are more open to saying, we'll give this a try. If it doesn't work, we tried it. We can go back to what we've been doing for years. If it doesn't work, but let's give it a try. Let's see. And the benefits hopefully will outweigh potential negatives.
Yeah. I was thinking about why we've been slower to adopt. Why the mining industry, or why aggregates has always been the laggard when it comes to adoption of technology. And I kind of came up with a few reasons. Some of it fits into what you're talking about, or always having done things a certain way. I think for the longest time, and there's still the case to be true here with the family orientedness of our industry. I mean, we have a lot of family companies. A grandfather passed down the business to a father, then to a son. In some cases we got 2 or 3, 4 generation companies. And so the way of doing things, the equipment that was utilized or not utilized, was passed down from grandfather to father, father to son. So there's that narrative, and I think there's a case to be made that the more private equity even coming in, bringing in fresh dollars or new dollars, new ideas, wanting to do things a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more efficiently, not afraid to stay in the box that we were in for a long time as an industry. So I think that factors at play. I think there's also this dynamic, or this idea of prove it to me first, because again, we've done crushing and screening and processing rock for so long, for 100+ years as an industry. When a new crusher comes in, or there's some technology incorporated into the crusher, or some other component of the process of aggregate processing. It takes a lot of convincing to get an operator or a business owner to want to go down that route. And I think cost too. Especially the last year or two, I think that's been a factor to maybe hinder us a little bit. And I think on the flip side too, Jack, maybe on the consolidation side, I would argue too, the fact that our industry's got bigger companies, we're as big as we've ever been in terms of some of the company sizes. I think a possible limitation too is that maybe we have too many cooks in the kitchen. So when I say that, maybe we're not able to make decisions adeptly. So you go to ConExpo, for example, and you see all this new tech. Well, that's great, but how do you get that funneled through a major company with so many people? So many people want to have a say on the decision of buying into a technology. So I mean, that's something that maybe slows us down as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you look at it from both sides, where there's there might be the thought of, oh, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, I think a lot of companies and a lot of producers, manufacturers, whoever be, are realizing that it is or will soon become the difference of, okay, we can operate at the same level we've been, but if XYZ company that's our competitor is starting to adopt these things and they're operating at, 1.5, 2 times the level we're operating at, yeah, we can keep doing what we're doing, but do we want to lag behind? Do we want to be that sort of laggard that you're talking about, that I think might be one of my new favorite words? Or do we want to keep up with the other companies and possibly supersede them if we can adopt the right stuff and start doing things? And I also think there's just an interesting thing to look at, the difference, or maybe what you've seen between what larger, maybe public companies are doing because of that cost element, or maybe the accessibility to it, versus maybe a smaller private company that might not have the means or the resources, or maybe the ability to test and fail, where it would have to be something that works right from the get-go. They don't have the luxury to be able to take a hit of trying something new and it not working. So definitely a lot at play, but I think just to kind of bring it all full circle, like you said, I think we're starting to see that trend in the right direction.
Yeah. So maybe to lay out the trends that we've seen, there's two or three of them that I think really are taking center stage at this point. And even since the turn of the calendar year, Jack, we've seen some developments in a couple of these. And I would start with number one being digitalization. There's a lot more digital technology being embedded and utilized in aggregate operations, and I'll get a little bit more into that here in a bit with you. Then, secondarily, I think there's sustainability is a big driver. You see a lot of these initiatives by the public companies. A lot of the companies in our industry are vertically integrated, and so they have initiatives maybe on the cement side of their business or the ready mix side. I don't know that sustainability is permeating quite as much in the aggregates world as it is those other more downstream construction materials environments, but some of those initiatives that you're seeing from the public producers who are vertically integrated, they're taking some of that mindset and then bringing it into the aggregate side of their business as well. And then this other trend, or the third one I would say, is autonomous hauling. It's something I know we've touched on in the podcast previously, probably once or twice, and one of the more exciting developments that we're seeing. We're not fully there yet, not really even partially there yet at this point in terms of having a autonomous hauling world, but that's kind of where we are. Those are the trends that I would say, 1, 2, and 3: digitalization, sustainability, and autonomous hauling, that are kind of driving the headlines for Pit and Corey these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like those are the kind of buzzwords or talking points you almost can't avoid if you're in the industry, whether it's someone talking about what they as a company or they as an individual are working on, or even if there's people that are maybe trying to debunk what these sort of trends are doing, or maybe trying to poke holes in what's going on. But either way, I mean, those sort of three things I think are definitely are among the most relevant that we've heard about, because they're so front and center, not only in this industry, but I think across industries. Maybe not necessarily the autonomous hauling part, but you look at autonomy, AI, a lot of the ways to do more with fewer people. And then to go along with digitalization and sustainability, I mean, sustainability, you can throw a rock and hit a company that probably has some kind of sustainability initiative right now, whether it's big or small, whether it's a public or private company, of any kind in any industry. So, I think the industry is doing, sort of a good job in that sense of keeping up with what is going on, not only industry wide, but really kind of country and in some senses maybe worldwide, um, to make sure that they are staying as relevant and as up to date as possible. So a lot of cool stuff going on in each of those three topics.
With digitalization, Jack, I'd say really that's what that's all about is kind of equipping the equipment that we've long used, crushing, screening, scales, those sorts of things. Everything pretty much that lives in a quarry environment that's a hard good. It's putting a sensor or a widget or something on it that allows you to extract some information about how that device is performing. That isn't brand new, I would say, but I think now we're to a point where producers are maybe getting into it, adopting a little bit more with the idea that the more information they have at their fingertips about the performance of their screen, for example, they can get in front of the maintenance of that screen, plan a little better, know when a part's going down or has gone down, and more proactively make decisions. Save a little bit more money at the same time, make better use of their labor force, their active employee base, so that they can be a little bit more efficient with the things that they're doing in or around the plant on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of the digitalization is driven, I would say, by the manufacturing side or the vendor side, those serving the producers. I don't necessarily know that producers were asking for it. And I almost think that there have been a couple iterations, at least in my time, in terms of digitalization for our industry or data development. Because when I go back a couple of ConExpos ago, probably three, I would say, back in 2014, I think there was a time leading up to 2014 or so when our industry was kind of operating in the dark ages, maybe, just to put it mildly, where we weren't using a lot of modern technology. You think about the smartphone. I mean, I'm thinking back when I got my first Apple phone, it probably was 2007 or 2008. I mean, and so another decade goes by and we're not really operating plants or getting information on our phones about our plants or our equipment, 7 to 8 years, 10 years after the advent of the iPhone or the iPad or tablets and smartphone type devices. So we saw that a lot of companies, on the manufacturing side, they brought out their first iterations of technology that allows you to know a little bit more about what's happening with their equipment that you're utilizing at your operations. But I think kind of what happened at that point in time, midway through the 2010s, let's say, was that there was so much data being put out there by some of these products, whether it was rolling stock or aggregate processing equipment, that producers didn't really know what to do with all that information. And I think just looking at the magazine, for example, Pit and Quarry, Jack, we have a data and analytics team, and they're providing us data, and they can provide a plethora of data to us about what stories are performing, what topics resonate with our readers. I think there's value to all data, but just like with our readers and the producers out there, I think we were experiencing data overload, and we essentially just had to kind of evaluate that overload and say, these are the metrics that we need, and that's what producers did too. And so essentially what happened, at least from my view, is that we saw a next generation or a 2.0 generation of technology products come out in the last 3 to 6 years, and they're resonating a little bit more with our readers, with agri producers. I think there's still some conditioning to do among the agri producers out there to use things a little bit more, some of the newer things that are out there, but it's coming, and it's in a better place today than it was 10 years ago, I guess.
Absolutely. I think one of the things you talk about, all the different ways digitalization is being used in the industry. I was just earlier today, I was reviewing a page from Pit and Quarry February issue. Be sure to be on the lookout for Pit and Quarry February coming out next month. And on the page, there were 2 or 3 different types of monitoring softwares. There was one for a screen, one for a different type that I'm drawing a blank on right now. But that's one of the things that I think has been striking to me since joining this industry, is that you have hardware and software, again, to measure vibrations for blasts. You have hardware and software to measure how your screen is performing, how your conveyors are performing, what your haul truck fleets are looking like, where everything is. And I think that it in a way has made it incredibly simple for operators, but at the same time, kind of as you mentioned, and this is I think one of the things I've been hearing a lot of when I talk to people about digitalization, is that oversaturation, or, since I love little quips, how I like to put it, paralysis by overanalysis, where if you have just a boatload of data in front of you, you're almost staring at it like, where do I even start with this? Obviously, it can be tricky finding that sweet spot, but I mean, I think we've seen, or at least heard, how it's paid off in helping operations, save time, save money, be more productive, increase their uptime, and really also help when the industry's continuing to face a labor shortage, where if you have fewer people that you need to gather this data or to compile it in a way that is beneficial, um, that's obviously a time and money saver. And I think one of the other ways that I know we'll get into a little bit later in this episode is that we've been hearing about is the way it's being used for ticketing, for weighing. Before, I remember back at, I think it was Ag 122, I sat in on a seminar that talked about how previously, or years ago, truck would come up, would get weighed or be evaluated in a certain way, and you'd have to hand print a ticket. All right, well, you got to wait for that to print. It's print on one of those, like, basically a fax machine almost, and you got to wait for that. Oh, well, now the printer's jammed. Now we got to get that fixed. Now we got to send it through the tube to the person. They got to check it out, look at it. All right, yeah, sign off on it, send it back. And now it's as simple as pulling out your phone, saying, all right, you have it now. Go ahead, handle it when you get back to wherever. So it's seeing it actually play out is something that's obviously talked about a lot, but seeing true examples of it, I think, is so impressive to show. Yeah, there might be some areas of the industry that are slow to adapt, but I mean, when it comes to obviously the valuable data that these operators are looking for, there's certainly no shyness in that front, which is cool to see.
Yeah, it's interesting to see from a vendor standpoint too. A lot of companies have come into our industry from outside aggregates. Not necessarily everybody that's coming into our industry, knows the industry, or has products that are custom for the industry. But I guess, just to put more plainly too, everybody realizes that we're ripe for change. Ripe for growth, and technology is at the center of all of that. Another thing too, and I think this thought popped in my mind when you said something, Jack, but you mentioned labor, and I think when we get into more technology, or when we finally do, or as we adopt more technologies in the industry, that we're going to be off for the better in terms of recruiting and bringing the next generation in, because we had, as I mentioned earlier too, the grandfather imparted on the father to the son, the same ideals, the same ways of doing things and processes. And what we've seen, I'd say, the last 5, 7, 10 years, we've seen more outside the industry people come into aggregates, more technology savvy people come in, helping longtime producers, public producers, and others, help them shape the future of their company and how they're doing business operationally and financially, and they're using technologies in ways today that they didn't 5 to 10 years ago. And it's exciting. I think there's a lot more room for growth and room for change, but we're getting there. I guess we're still a laggard, you could say, but better late to the party than never, right?
100%. And I think you brought up an interesting point, and I guess I'll just kind of wrap my thoughts on digitalization with this. You talk about how the industry is adopting all this new technology and using it to essentially attract people, where it's interesting kind of looking at the aggregate industry versus other industries, where I feel like other industries or other types of businesses, you see more technology coming in to kind of do some of these jobs as far as compiling data or sending out bills or whatever the case be. And people would look at that and say, like, oh, you're doing away with human jobs, you're replacing people. Well, aggregates in an interesting spot, because you're never going to be able to fully get rid of people, and in a sense it's almost the opposite, where the more technology you have, the more you'll be able to maybe attract people. You might not need as many physical people, but I think the more technology you have, the more appealing a job might be to someone, seeing that you're on the forefront of this, and there isn't that concern of, oh, well, you've got a data management system running. Well, I'm out of a job. Someone's like, no, like I want to be a part of this. I want to find a spot for myself. So it's just kind of an interesting dichotomy looking at how aggregates responds to having this type of technology that could be looked at in other industries as, taking away jobs.
An area that will be interesting to see how it fits or doesn't with our industry is AI. I mean, that was all the rage in 2023, and we covered that as a company. Not just Pitt and Corey, but at our parent company, North Coast Media, and we meet every year. AI was kind of the central theme of the conversations that we had as a company. Looking at how that's going to impact journalism and publishing, and how we tell stories and what the issues are there. And there's a lot of issues, from a legal side to probably half a dozen others right now. But I don't really honestly have a full beat right now on where AI or how AI is going to impact our industry. And I've had conversations with producers and contractors out there just to kind of gauge their thoughts, and they don't really feel, from what they've largely told me, that it's going to be a game changer for aggregates. I would imagine it's going to have a place somewhere, but to be determined, I suppose, for our industry. And again, I suppose maybe on the positive side of this, I mean, if you don't want more AI or you're worried about protecting jobs, I mean, if our industry is historically a laggard on some things, maybe being a laggard on AI isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're worried about retaining jobs.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I just think, again, just a final thought on that, one of the things that stuck out to me during that meeting that you talked about is the way AI is already in use, kind of maybe without us knowing it. I know the software we use to transcribe our interviews is AI. There's different ways we interact with AI in kind of a day-to-day way that we might not even think about or don't look at necessarily as AI. But I think certainly, the rise of the chat GPTs and all this different stuff that you can throw in a prompt and it'll recreate a photo based on your prompt in half a second. I think it's sort of bringing that thought to the forefront, which I think is good, because again, industries like ours are going to have to decide. I don't even think the question is there a home for this? I think the question is, where is the home for this? Because it's something that is at least currently gathering so much steam and is so on the forefront of everyone's mind, and in so many things that are being done right now, that it might be hard for the industry to avoid it. So I think the more open-minded companies and businesses and people can be to saying, this is going to happen, where are we best served by including this? I think the easier that transition will be.
Yeah, if AI proves that it can increase efficiencies, make you more productive, make you safer, taking the people out of the quarry or the environment that has the inherent risks, if it can contribute to sustainability in some way or simplification, I think you're right, Jack. If you're a business owner or operator and you're not exploring that, you're not doing yourself, your company, your people a service. So we'll put a pin on digitalization, and that's a topic I think we'll probably be talking about on Drilling Deeper in episodes to come. We're always going to be talking about equipment and technology on the podcast here, but so digitalization, trend number one. Trend number two, again, sustainability, and when I think about that, I think about the transformation in terms of power, fuel, and what's essentially behind the equipment that allows it to go. We're a very much diesel-oriented, diesel-powered industry, long have been, and now we're seeing this potential push, at least on the vendor side, I would say, and maybe they're being pushed by other entities like regulators, government, etc., to kind of find other ways to power our facilities, to power the equipment powering our facilities. And electric's all the rage right now. We heard about that quite a bit at ConExpo, ConAg in 23, and here in 24, we're only a couple weeks into the new year here, and we already saw one of the industry's biggest producers make a big announcement on the electrification side. We published early this year already how CRH and Caterpillar struck a partnership agreement on electrification. They're looking to accelerate the deployment of CRH's, potentially CRH's 70 to 100 ton class battery electric off-highway trucks. So CAT has that equipment, and CRH is basically the first to sign this kind of agreement with Caterpillar to see what the potential is there. We've seen this sort of thing happening on the autonomous front, and here we've got CRH, basically formalizing this agreement to explore through a pilot program, I guess, what the potential is for an electric hauler, an electric fleet in an aggregate environment. So I've already started kind of drawing up, and working with you on our roundtable questions. The Pitt and Corey roundtable is coming up February 1st and 2nd, and we're going to have a great opportunity, Jack, to hear from producers and manufacturers and others at our annual events down in South Florida. What the potential is or what the road ahead is with electrification. But just like digitalization, I think we're in the very early stages, and I would even say on the electric front, we're in the even earlier stages. And I don't necessarily know that the industry at large is necessarily supportive of this because, again, we've been a diesel industry for so long. This is another one of those cases where we don't want to change. We've done things a certain way, and to even think to kind of turn over diesel to electric overnight, 5-10 years from now is crazy. And I know when we were preparing, we're talking about these 2050 initiatives, or in some cases more aggressive 2030, 2035, net zero carbon emissions initiatives. So these sorts of partnerships and pursuits like the CRH Cat one on electric hauling equipment, that's how companies are going to try to get there. But interesting what we've seen in terms of sustainability for the aggregate industry, and I think for me at least, the number one bullet point underneath that would be electric equipment and what its potential is for our industry.
Yeah, and that CRH Cat news is obviously, like you mentioned, a pretty big development on that front. Two major companies, one of the bigger producers in the country, and obviously Caterpillar, who's a major player in the equipment game. And it's cool seeing that after I think it was in the summer of 22, around the time, maybe fall of 22, around the time we had our dealer issue, and I was talking to a rental company, and they had mentioned that they bought massive stock in electric pickups for on-road service or employee use. And they mentioned that that's going to be a big push, was them getting those on-road trucks, and obviously we see the off-road trucks now garnering more attention. And hopefully this news will continue to spark that movement, because it's certainly a trend in a direction, I suppose, for the individual to determine whether it's the right direction or not. But yeah, I think seeing two major companies like this take this step is I think going to be indicative of what might be to come as more and more people see again just the companies of these size take this step.
Another example too of our industry maybe following or being a laggard, but I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying, like you mentioned with the on-road environment, we see this big push. So now we're seeing companies like Caterpillar, Komatsu, and others, make investments in sustainable companies. For example, Komatsu last year acquired American Battery Solutions out of Detroit, and ABS manufactures heavy-duty and industrial battery packs, using lithium-ion batteries for off-road vehicles. So it's not just talk anymore. You see the big names, the big manufacturers in our space making real world investments, putting dollars forward, and they will help to set the direction for our industry. Get the next 50 to 70 years set for us. As we see that companies are putting out these initiatives related to their carbon emissions. And I mentioned electric. That was a lot of, I guess, what my diatribe was centered around. That's where we're seeing a lot of the focus and the money being invested in at this point. But electric isn't necessarily the winner. I think that we don't even know if it's going to be the winner in the on-road environment, because there's a lot of issues that we've seen reported about electric vehicles, and there's safety issues. There's with the vehicles themselves, and so a lot to watch. And I say that too. I've got an example here too with Caterpillar, looking to pursue hydrogen hybrid powers for their C13D engine. They've got a pilot program essentially for this engine that is utilized on rock crushers and screens. There's potential there for natural gas with that. So again, I think the Cats and the Komatsus of the world, they continue to put their tried and true, engines and equipment out there, that's framed around diesel. That's what the market is utilizing and wants at this moment in time. But they're very much planning for the years to come, and be curious to see who else follows on the manufacturing front. And again, how is our industry going to adopt or not adopt that, or are we going to be forced to adopt that at some point?
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head as far as saying and bringing up that thought that electric may not be the winner. And I think whether electric is the winner or not, whether it's more toward hydrogen, whatever sort of the down the road, whatever the predominant means of sustainability, or whether it's electrification, whatever it be, I think one thing is abundantly clear, and that is that it's not going to happen overnight. Like you mentioned, this is an industry that relies a lot on diesel. There's a lot of belief, and for good reason, that diesel is more efficient, more beneficial than electric. I mean, that again was a talking point in the story I did a couple years ago for the dealer issue, where they talk about, oh, we can get X amount of miles on diesel, we can only get X amount of miles on one charge, and the number was, in my opinion, strikingly different. Where I kind of thought, like, there's that much of a difference between diesel and electric, and as much as, and again, it's sort of to the individual to decide what's the best way to proceed, but whether you want to look at it or not, there's benefits to both, and there's certainly a case to be made for why diesel is the way to go in this industry. And I guess, kind of like you said about about digitalization, I guess it's kind of TBD on what, if there is going to be any, if there are going to be any laws made, or if there is going to be any sort of thing that requires companies and industry or businesses like ours in this industry to make that transition. I would probably tend to believe that wouldn't be the case, or wouldn't go that far. But again, we'll see what happens. And I think what's going to be interesting to me is to see how companies, you mentioned like with Caterpillar, go to options that aren't electric, go to hydrogen, go to whatever they need to do to find what is the most efficient, or what could be the most efficient replacement for diesel in the long run.
Thinking back, 10 years ago, I guess it would have been maybe even longer at this point, but there's this whole push for Tier 4 and Tier 4 final, vehicles, off-road vehicles, equipment, and we went through the whole process, the Tier 1, 2, 3, and so on. And talking to producers too about the Tier 4 final type equipment, it's out there. Not everybody likes it. Some people really don't like it, so they're looking for workarounds, trying to find equipment that, can still be in service and in the field today. So with that whole idea, the Tier 4 final movement, as I describe it, I think, we're going to have producers that don't like the direction, that are going to look for, workarounds, or try to stick with things as they were. And, maybe that's okay, maybe that's not. I'm not trying to judge one way or another. I think we're still feeling out all these technologies and where we're trying to get the industry at this point in time. But again, it's going to be fun to watch, interesting to watch, and see where things go. Lastly, I mentioned those other two trends. Onto our third one here, autonomy. It is a digital movement for our industry to go to autonomous hauling or explore this. Last year the story was one that kind of was very much centered around Caterpillar and Luckstone and what they're doing with 777 haul trucks from Caterpillar. They're obviously going to try to roll out some exploration this year in Virginia, and again, just like we heard from CRH already, in the last few weeks about electric equipment. They're too looking at autonomous hauling. They put out an announcement because they're partnering with Safe AI, which I think is a company that either you or I've worked with in the past, Jack. I can't remember exactly, but so essentially, CRH has a venture capital unit called CRH Ventures, and they're planning to evaluate the feasibility and what the capabilities are of autonomous hauling tech that's provided by Safe AI. It's a pilot program. CRH, just like with the electric equipment that they're looking at, on the autonomous hauling equipment side, they're still very much in a pilot program phase. But again, I can't imagine a company's gonna take on the exploration if they don't see great potential there, for efficiencies in production and safety, and a whole other list of benefits that could come to them. So I think now we've got Luckstone and CRH in the fold here. Two of the probably top 10 companies on the crushed stone side. I think if I'm remembering correctly, on the top 100 list that we put out there. I'm sure there's going to be another domino that falls, or somebody else that partners with a Caterpillar, or a Safe AI, or somebody on this front to see what is possible with technology and aggregates. But again, it's one that's exciting because it's different. We don't know what we don't know, and hopefully we get some answers here, this year and in the coming years from some of our leading industry companies.
And I think it's not only exciting because it's different, which it certainly is. I think it's exciting seeing hearing from Luckstone and Caterpillar, reading about CRH, understanding the way you put it, the efficiencies that this type of technology, at least on paper, can provide, it to me seems like almost a no-brainer that once this is something that is sort of maybe custom built or built enough for the aggregate industry, it feels like this is just going to go to the moon in a sense. And we've talked about before, mentioning the Cat Luckstone deal, or partnership, using the 777, the 100 tons. And I know we've talked before about how scaling it down is kind of the issue. That's something I talked a little bit with the company Pronto AI about for our January issue. They did a case study looking at how small autonomous, small manned, medium autonomous, and medium manned trucks did sort of like a simulated case study with all of those different types of trucks, and sort of showed why smaller might be the way to go around sort of the 25 to 70 ton range, might be the way to kind of operate. And obviously, Luckstone's putting themselves in the position to use the 100 ton, which I think is going to be a fascinating thing to follow as this year goes on once they put it into the bull run plan. Um, but as much as we talk about it, it's funny. This is one of those topics where, when I got on, supply chain lead times, those were kind of the dominating factors. After a while, you're kind of like, oh, I gotta write about supply chain more. I gotta talk to more people about how they're waiting for parts. I personally never get tired of hearing about what's going on with autonomy or what's going on with autonomous hauling. It's something that I can't wait to see this hopefully come to fruition in the industry to a point where it's readily accessible. It's something that is proven. You talk about the sort of prove it to me first approach that a lot of producers will take. So I'm beyond ecstatic to see what this year brings, and seeing now that CRH is exploring this as well is just another great step in the right direction.
If I was betting on if we're going to get there or not, I would bet on we will get there. I don't know that we're going to get there in the next 3 years, maybe in the next 5 to 7. But the fact that they're using the intelligence or the technology in mining tells me that we could do it in aggregates. We could scale it down. We could scale it down to the level that's the most efficient from what you're describing, as Pronto put it out. I think we'll get there because of the desire to just push, innovate, and try to discover the things that we don't know. If there's not a cost basis to it or a cost reason to do it, I mean, maybe this is something that gets scrapped or put to the side, or maybe it never comes to the light of day. But I do think it will have a place. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be how every load and haul operation industry wide goes about doing things. I still think you'll have manned trucks. I don't think that's going to fully go away, at least in our lifetimes. But I think we can get to a point where, and we see that this is a fraction or a good chunk of, reasonably sized operations. It's probably a niche type producer that can put it to use and make the cost argument for investing in it. But yeah, it's probably going to be the story of the decade, I would say, to see if we can bring it to commercialization and make it truly viable.
Yeah, you mentioned if you were a betting man, you might not say the next 3 years, but I'll tell you what, in sportsbook parlance, if I had to say in the next 5 years, I'd put the money line odds at about minus 400, minus 450. Seems, like you said, seems very likely, again, with just how forward thinking the industry is with a lot of this stuff. It does seem like an inevitability, but in sort of the best way possible.
Maybe one other thought related to kind of close out the whole trends topic. And I shared this at the South Carolina Aggregates Association's show, and there's a lot of new coming in, and maybe you're a company that's already doing some of the things or exploring the things that Jack and I are talking about here, and maybe you're not. I mean, there's probably more of you out there who aren't necessarily on the cutting edge of this, but maybe you're dabbling or exploring a little bit. But as I talk to producers who are looking to do things a little bit differently, bring in new people to try to move things forward a little bit with equipment and technology, and I think I hear a couple of sentiments that lend themselves to success. And one is to build slow. There's a lot that you could do or choose to do in terms of adopting technology, digitizing your equipment, your crushers, your screens, your rolling stock. You could do a lot of things at once, or you could do one thing at once and and see how that performs, and then build that one thing into another, and so start slowly, and work with your vendors to try to best reshape or pave the road forward for your company in the future. And I think another thing that producers have shared over the years that's allowed them to excel is find the person in your organization who can help you move things forward. Or if that person doesn't exist in your organization, find the person from the outside and bring them in, somebody who can be the champion for the next generation of how you guys are going to run operationally, financially, and through other means of your company. Jake, any other thoughts you want to add on the trends?
Yeah, just I guess one last thing I'll mention when you talk about building slow is that something that I think, at least for someone like me, is a kind of hard thing to do. Where I'm, at least personally, I'm a very impatient person. I kind of want everything to happen now. I know it's obviously a different scenario in business, but there's a phrase that comes to mind that I remembered hearing at one point where having micro speed but macro patience is kind of the key, where day to day you want to be doing everything you can to continue moving forward, but big picture, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to achieve everything you want to do in a week, but do as much as you can every day just to keep building that. And then over the big picture, you're going to get to where you want by taking those sort of day at a time, putting everything into it. Micro speed, macro patience is just something that I think kind of sums up what you're talking about. And I think it's something that our industry is very already pretty well fine tuned for.
Well, good final food for thought from Jack on our trends. We're at the point in time where we just announced our 2024 class for the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. Actually, we just did that today as we're filming this in studio in our downtown Cleveland office. But essentially, every Ag 1 year, and this is an Ag 1 year, Ag 1's March 25th through the 27th in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City Center. So every Ag 1 year, Pit and Quarry celebrates the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. Typically, we would enshrine 4 individuals within each class, and so we just announced our 2024 class. And it's going to be made up of these 4 individuals: Tom Hill from Summit Materials, Neil Heiss from Semco, Louis Johnson from LJ Manufacturing, and Charlie Luck from Luck Companies. We just mentioned Luck Stone earlier on the podcast, and not surprising necessarily that any of these 4 individuals were selected for induction, as we have a selection committee that we've worked with over the years, and every living Hall of Famer gets a vote in our Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Tom, Neil, Charlie, and Louis Johnson will be enshrined posthumously. Again, he was with LJ, huge on the crushing and screening side, in the mid 20th century for our industry. And Jack and I will be down in Nashville for that. It's a black tie ceremony, and our producer Marie behind the scenes is going to be down there as well. So if you want to celebrate our 2024 class, we welcome you to join us. Go to pitandquarry.com for more information about the ceremony and how you can join us at our ticketed event. So we've got a roundtable coming up, and we're planning on doing an episode or 2 down there when we've got the industry, basically everybody together. That's always exciting. So a lot coming at us as a staff here in the next few weeks. And Jack, welcome back. Glad you're healthy.
Thanks for having me back.
For Jack Kapansky, I'm Kevin Yannick. See you next time.